planetary princesses, and you have landed on our planet. A spell has been cast, and now you are one of us.
Hello and welcome to Planetary Princesses, your royal invitation to the cosmos. I'm Ashlee,
And I'm Kate.
and we are so excited to have you here with us today as we dive into Taylor's personal asteroids and the cosmic fingerprints behind the biggest moments of her career.
Yes. So in our last episode, we went deep into Taylor's birth chart. And honestly, it really felt like we were peeling back the layers of such a mythic pop star. But today, we're taking it one step further.
Yeah, we're going a little deeper. So we're talking about Taylor's personal asteroids. So these are named asteroids that are significant in her life, as well as the goddess energies that don't always show up in a standard chart reading. But when they do, they are so intimate and they tell really specific stories about her life.
Exactly. These are the placements that feel like whispers from the universe. Asteroids like Taylor and Swift. Yes, I'm not kidding. Those exact asteroids, her actual name written in the sky. We have asteroids for her parents, her grandmother, and like Ashlee mentioned, even the goddess archetypes that flow through her creative process. And this is where we really start to see why her legacy hits so deep. It's literally encoded in the stars.
Oh, I love talking about the goddesses. And when you talk about the goddesses in someone's chart, you can find out like which Greek goddesses or Roman goddesses and gods from mythology that you might have read or can read about are actually implanted in your own consciousness. And if you ever wondered what makes like a star so soulful, or why Taylor's words particularly feel like spells, or how her chart reflects the exact people and powers who shaped her, buckle up because this asteroid tea is steaming.
Yes, it is piping hot tea right here, and let's get into it. So, something about astrology that is so cool is that you have your planets, but you also have asteroids. And there are actually 25,000 named asteroids through the International Astronomical Union. And when you go to the website astro.com or other astrology websites where you can look up your chart, if you go to the extended chart reading, you can actually scroll through their list. They're alphabetized of each section of named asteroids. And one of my favorite things to do for people is to do a personal asteroid reading where I look up their names, people important to them, places they've lived. And so we did that with Taylor today. And we're going to start with asteroid Taylor. She has asteroid Taylor in her chart at 21 degrees Aries. It forms a beautiful trine with both her sun and asteroid Swift in Sagittarius. So it's just crazy. Asteroid Taylor and asteroid Swift actually exist, and you can look them up in anyone's chart, but especially Taylor's chart.
So
So,
asteroid Taylor is like flying through space right now as we speak.
yes, it is. It's just gliding through the air. And if you ever wonder what's going on with Taylor Swift or a person named Taylor in your life, just look up asteroid 2603 and you can find out. And so when we looked at Taylor's birth chart, which is the snapshot of the energy that was in the sky when Taylor was born, asteroid Taylor is at 21 degrees Aries. And this is such a fiery declaration of her identity because Aries is the sign of the trailblazer, bold, first, fearless. So she didn't wait for permission to start her career. She leapt headfirst into the spotlight, fully herself, fully owning her name and claiming space with her artistry. Isn't that so cool?
So wild. And also Aries is the sign of I am. It's all about like who you are, the self-independent declaration. So for Taylor to be an Aries, it's basically saying I am Taylor.
Oh my
And
gosh, so
the
cute.
trine to her sun and even like the Swift asteroid is so powerful. It's going to fuse her soul essence coming from the sun and her public persona coming from Swift. And the identity marker of her first name, Taylor, it's all like combined. I mean, this chart has to be for someone named Taylor.
Totally. And it's like, you can't make this up the way that it is so perfect here. The combination of that Aries Taylor asteroid and her Sagittarius energy is like a cosmic green light saying, yes, you are meant to pop off as Taylor Swift. There's just something so natural about it because a trine aspect is a flowing aspect. It's like her name was destined to be iconic, and it's cute too. Like, she started so young and she moved to Nashville, learning guitar, making demos, sending them out to people in the industry. She just knew from a young age, Aries is the sign of the baby in the zodiac. Like, from the moment she was born, she just knew that she'd have to build a personal brand, and it wouldn't just be about her voice or guitar playing. It was about her songwriting, her storytelling. And that Aries Taylor energy tells us that she was determined to make it happen.
So cool. And even like the asteroid Swift, it's conjunct her sun in Sagittarius. And that is like chef's kiss in astrology. So her soul identity and her last name are literally one, which is crazy. And you can't even make that up. Whoever says astrology isn't real, they just need to look at the name asteroids that are going through their charts. So this kind of conjunction will infuse her core essence with her family name, her brand, and even her fame. And the fact that like her fans are called Swifties, that's straight up asteroid Swift magic. It's written in the stars that her last name would be more than a last name. It would become like this whole movement. Swifties, just like me and Kate, and probably a lot of our listeners were Swifties.
Yes, it's just amazing. When I looked up those asteroids in her chart, my jaw dropped because you can't make this up. And another really cool thing in her chart is everybody who's a Swiftie knows how important Taylor's mom is to her. Her mom's name is Andrea. And so when we were looking at the chart, we looked up asteroid Andrea Doria, and that is at 8 degrees Sagittarius. So something about name asteroids that's cool is even if they don't match the person's name exactly, like this asteroid is Andrea Doria. Doria isn't Taylor's mom's middle name or anything, but the beauty of the name asteroids is truly, even if they phonetically sound the same or they have a part of the person's name, I've done so many chart readings for people and they always are spot on. It's like the universe speaks in the language of sounds, and it doesn't even have to be exactly the name of the person for it to be relevant. And so for this asteroid, Andrea Doria, it's at 8 degrees Sagittarius, and it's just a few degrees away from Taylor's sun in Sagittarius. And that co-presence really means everything. Her mom's not just the background, she's a major part of Taylor's life path. She's really her right-hand woman, her supporter, and her emotional compass.
And I was also thinking that whenever you see a placement at 8 degrees, it gives it like a little Scorpio flavor to it. 'Cause 8 degrees is a Scorpio number. So I was thinking that also will give us a clue on the influence that Taylor Swift's mom had on her, Scorpio. So the mother was very influential in developing Taylor's emotions, connection, transformations, and also Taylor has her Mars in Scorpio. So for Taylor's mom, Andrea Doria Asteroid at 8 degrees, it's saying that her mom had like an impact on her drive and her motivation.
Wow, that's such a cool connection to make. And we'll talk about her dad's asteroid in a second. Her dad's asteroid is in Scorpio as well. So that's really cool that her mom's asteroid is at a Scorpio degree, even though it's actually in the sign of Sagittarius. That's so cool. And just to wrap up Andrea's asteroid, that Sagittarius energy that it brings is just so optimistic and visionary and global. Like, Sagittarius is the sign of the traveler, and especially long distance travel. And that's so perfect with Andrea because she's literally traveled the world with her daughter. There's clips of her in the Taylor Swift Miss Americana documentary where they're on a private jet together, like flying across the world together with her mom's dog, actually, who is a giant dog. I don't know what breed, but it's like the biggest dog I've ever seen, her mom's dog.
Do we know the name of her dog?
No, I need to look up the name of her dog.
Hold on,
Stay
I'm going to
tuned.
call her mom right now and ask her what's the name of her dog. Do you know
We need-
Doria? I mean, she might.
Wait, we need to find out. Maybe her dog's name is Doria, and then that's what brings it all together. That would make a lot of sense. But basically, like, that Sagittarius energy for Andrea's asteroid just really fits with the vibe of Taylor's life. She really understands Taylor's fire, and she encourages it, and she fans the flames when needed and stands beside her, literally just like they're beside each other in the chart, stands beside her in real life when things get tough. And their relationship is really expansive, supportive, and rooted in belief, which are just core Sagittarius values. And then moving on to the Scorpio asteroid for her dad, his asteroid is at 26 degrees Scorpio. It's exactly conjunct her Mars. So can you talk about what that means for her?
That's really revealing because Mars is how we move through the world and how we fight and how we go after our desires. So having her dad's asteroid on top of her Mars really suggests that he's a powerful catalyst for her own ambition. Her dad was a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. So he's like literally someone who deals with other people's money. Scorpio will rule inheritances and investments and even wealth management. So this placement couldn't be any more literal that Scott is at Scorpio at 26 degrees. He was never just a background character in her life. He helped shape the way how Taylor approached her business strategy, stealthy and strong, right? Scorpio doesn't waste energy. It strikes only when something matters. So that's something that Taylor really mirrored in her career, like knowing when to speak and when to strike and when to make a move. So her Mars conjunct asteroid Scott will tell us her ability to be like the scorpion, right? Only stinging when they know their poison will be the most effective. They're not a bee going around just stinging whoever's in their way. They plan it and they do it when they need to. And that's such a Scorpio. A bee is more like Gemini, as we discussed. So she likely learned that way of the business from him with that conjunction. That's what it tells us.
And that asteroid placement for her dad, it really just shows that they are meant to do business together. And he is her right hand businessman. And so I love seeing that placement for her in the chart. And something else cool, the last name asteroid that's personal to her we wanted to talk about is asteroid Marjorie. And if you're a Swiftie, you know there is a song named Marjorie on Evermore. It represents her grandmother, and that asteroid is at 19 degrees Scorpio, and it's conjunct her Pluto. Okay, like that gives me chills. I love seeing this because Pluto is about transformation, power, and legacy. And something about Marjorie, her grandmother, is that she was a soprano and she was an opera singer, and she even hosted a TV show in Puerto Rico. So Marjorie was a star in her own right. And it's just amazing how Taylor literally has a song called Marjorie on Evermore, all about the memories of her grandmother. And it's the bittersweet, like, sacred tribute to a woman that shaped her. In the song, she talks about how she didn't really fully realize it at the time. And I think that's really beautiful because with Scorpio, it's a process of transformation. And so she had this influence from her grandmother at a young age, and it took her many, many years to really fully let it sink in, like how much of an influence her grandmother's own career and spirit of love for music and even love for fame influenced Taylor's own journey and becoming the person that she is today. It's the conjunction of Marjorie's asteroid on her Pluto is really just telling us that Taylor's taken the spirit of her grandmother's artistry and transmuted it into her own legacy. Like, Marjorie's dreams didn't vanish. What died didn't stay dead. They evolved through Taylor, and this is generational alchemy.
I really like how you said that she didn't realize it at first, because one thing I noticed about Pluto is wherever you have it, it's something that you don't see as clearly or something you don't have earlier in life. And as you get older and you grow more, your Pluto placement starts becoming way more clear and way more relatable to you. So, since Marjorie is connected to Pluto, she didn't realize how strong her grandmother's influence would be on her, I guess, until she got famous and her Pluto started taking effect, and she realized more and more that her connection to Marjorie, her grandmother, is so important. So what makes this even more moving is that asteroid Marjorie trines her Chiron in Cancer. So Chiron is like the wounded healer, and this trine is suggesting that connecting with her grandmother's memory has been so healing for her, especially around those tender childhood wounds about belonging and worthiness. When you have Chiron in Cancer, it's going to ask, like, am I really enough? And Marjorie's presence in her life says, yes, sweetheart, you belong. The spotlight is yours now.
So beautiful. So beautiful. And that is just another amazing, perfectly aligned connection in Taylor's chart. And speaking of perfectly aligned connections, we want to talk about a few of the goddess asteroids that Taylor has in her chart and where they are. And Ashlee, we love goddess asteroids, don't we?
We do. Literally run your asteroids in your chart. Like Kate said, go to extended chart selection because it'll show which goddesses are really implanted in your own being. And there's a lot of goddesses of different talents. So if you have this connected to one of your personal planets or angles, even like your MC, IC, AC, DC, whatever, all that stuff, it's going to really show what talents you might have. So we're about to reveal, well, we already know Taylor's talents, but we're going to really reveal some of them in her chart. But let's start with, you want to talk about, please don't get mad at
Hecate?
me for is it Hecate or is it Hecate?
I think it's Hecate, but
Okay,
I
let's
could be
just say
wrong.
Hecate.
So the goddess Hecate, spelled Hekate, or sometimes they spell it Hecate. But this goddess rules witchcraft and intuition and guiding souls through liminal spaces. And Taylor has this goddess asteroid at 10 degrees Gemini. And so having that asteroid for Hecate, the goddess of magic, crossroads, the unseen realms, at 10 degrees Gemini, this placement tells us that her words, Gemini, are magic. Hecate. Like, that's what it means when those two elements are together, Gemini and this goddess asteroid. So she really is doing something truly enchanting with her words. Her songwriting has always had the power to take us somewhere else, to unseen emotional landscapes, hidden places in the heart, and the poetic edges of memory. And there's just something witchy about the way that she writes. Like, she weaves spells through her lyrics. Like, has anyone listened to Evermore? Has anyone listened to Folklore? She really weaves the spells through her lyrics, and it's really cool too because Gemini rules siblings and sisterhood, and this goddess energy makes her feel like a cosmic sister to her fans, a real soul guide who helps us through our own transitions, all with her pen. And as everyone knows, she has 3 pens that she writes with. She writes with her quill pen, her fountain pen, and her glitter gel pen. And so that Gemini goddess asteroid magic working together in her chart is just really cool and explains why we feel that witchy, also wordy presence from Taylor.
And if you like Google Hecate, you can read some of the myths about her, and you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities in her own mythology with Taylor's life. Like Hecate like runs to the underworld and searches for people and brings them back. And if you listen to a few of Taylor's songs, you'll know that she's constantly, maybe not literally, but like in her own imagination, she goes to the underworld pretty often. And that's like Hecate's magic. So she can do
Totally.
that, and then she can write about it because it's in Gemini and be able to speak for it in her music.
That's so cool. I love goddess asteroids. And speaking of another kind of goddess asteroid, she actually has 2 in exactly the same place in her chart. She has Polyhymnia and Calliope. And Polyhymnia is the muse of sacred hymns and rhetoric, and Calliope is the muse of epic poetry. Sound like anybody you know? And those asteroids are both exactly at 6 degrees Capricorn, exactly the same spot in her chart. the muse of sacred hymns and rhetoric, and the muse of epic poetry. And if anybody is familiar with Greek mythology, the Muses are the 9 women that are the inspirational goddesses of literature, science, and the arts. So having these goddesses sitting together in that part of her chart, really the part of her chart that rules legacy and career and long-term success, it just shows how she's able to build over time all of that Capricorn energy fused with lyrics and hymns and poetry.
But I was just thinking, so Taylor has her Mercury in Capricorn, and I believe her Mercury is at like 8 degrees, 7 degrees, like right around there. The fact that it's conjunct these two means that her brain is literally attuned to these two goddesses, which brings her talent. And if she's a Capricorn rising, like we definitely suspect she is, it puts these two goddesses right on her identity. Like when you have a goddess asteroid right on your ascendant, it's almost like you are that goddess in this life. Or maybe you were that goddess if you believe in past lives. Or maybe you look just like that goddess. Sometimes, like when I see someone's asteroid has an asteroid conjunct their ascendant, I look up what that god or goddess looks like. And sometimes it kind of looks like them a little bit. So we should look up what they look like and see if they look like Taylor, because that would tell us if she's a Capricorn rising. It would be really good.
I could totally see that. That would make a lot of sense. And what's really cool too is, and really poetic, is the timing, because Saturn rules Capricorn, and that's the sign that these two muses are in. And around her Saturn return, just after she turned 29, she lost ownership of her masters. And what did she do? She activated these muse placements. She stepped fully into her role as a songwriter and reclaimed her voice, re-recording her entire catalog with wisdom, strategy, and artistry. And that's really embodying the essence of these goddesses, the epic, heroic poetry. It's sacred and it's muse energy coming to life. And what's so cool too is that these asteroids are opposite her moon and Jupiter in Cancer. So her emotional truth and capacity for deep love and connection were challenging her to rise up and do something bold. Like when you have an opposition in your chart, it's kind of like a stare down. And so these two energies were staring each other in the face, and the muses were calling, and during her Saturn return, and she answered. And that is just so cool.
So Polyhymnia and Calliope are both conjunct her Mercury, her voice, and Uranus, innovation. She has a Mercury and Uranus conjunction, just like your planetary princess Ashlee. Let me tell you, that makes your brain move so fast. Like it moves so fast, my brain, that like when I want to talk, sometimes my words come out all busted and twisted because I can't catch up speaking with my brain. And Taylor has it too. I need advice from Taylor because sometimes when I talk, I feel like my voice comes out wonky with Uranus because Uranus is a tilter. So sometimes I feel like when I speak, my voice goes, "Ooh," but Taylor like literally mastered that. I know she takes a lot of voice lessons, but she probably takes speaking lessons too. And so what it means is you use your words and your voice in a totally unexpected and revolutionary way. She most likely says things that just blow people's minds because it feels like they come out of left field, and they really do into her mind. They just pop and they come out. And in Capricorn, if you have this placement in Capricorn like Taylor, it comes out in like a really proper, helpful, and like structured way. For me, I have it in Scorpio, so it can come out kind of messy and deep and intense and emotional. But Taylor has it really good because she could just say it in a way that really fits into the conversation really well. And she showed the world how powerful a woman's intellect and artistry can be when it's paired with vision and resilience.
Yes, it's like that groundedness of the Capricorn energy with that conjunction really makes her words have weight, and why her lyrics are so like grounded in reality while also being able to tell us the stories that she makes up, like the visions that she has in her head. Like she can use the Capricorn energy to really ground it in reality and make everything make sense, and it has a lot of impact when she says it. Like she's standing on the top of a mountain making a proclamation. Like Capricorn is the sign of the mountain, and so yeah, that energy with those goddess asteroids blended together, it's like perfect storm for her to have this amazing career that's so strong and structured, but then all centered around the muse energy of epic poetry and music. And actually, speaking of another goddess asteroid with musical talent, she has the muse asteroid Euterpe in Aquarius. And this is the muse of music and lyric poetry. And what's so cool about goddess Euterpe's asteroid placement in her chart is that the asteroid Singer is also at 24 degrees Aquarius. So we just talked about two goddess asteroids that were conjunct in Capricorn. These next two, they're conjunct in Aquarius, and they're at the same exact degree as her Venus. And so again, there are no coincidences when it comes to astrology. We all came here and incarnated at the exact perfect time. And this incarnation of energy in her chart, the goddess of music and lyric poetry being conjunct asteroid Singer and her Venus, it really shows that Taylor values music, lyrics, storytelling, singing, and connection with the collective. Those are all Venus and Aquarius themes. And Aquarius energy is detached, but also community oriented. And this energy is the visionary who sings for the group. Like, she's not just writing songs for herself, she's giving voice to what so many of us feel. And that's Euterpe and Singer fused with her Venus.
Yeah, so these placements are also square her Mars in Scorpio. So that kind of creates some creative tension. It puts a lot of energy in one spot, and she just can't rest in comfort. She has to transform with every album, new aesthetic, a new sound, a new self, because that square just forces her to like move in a whole new way and to constantly reinvent yourself. That Mars square is what demands reinvention. It asks her to dive deep and to shapeshift. And when she does again and again, and still she remains untouchably Taylor, that cool girl Aquarius mystique, it kind of keeps her just out of reach, which every girl wants to be.
The ultimate cool girl, Taylor Swift. Love her.
Such
Love
a
her.
cool girl. So, do we think Juno is a cruel girl? Well, Juno is the goddess of marriage, soul contracts, and divine partnership. So, Juno was always like this beautiful, beautiful goddess. And then, if you look into Greek mythology, she married Jupiter, and Jupiter was kind of like a jerk. He cheated on her, he did all this like crazy stuff to her. But you know what? Juno stayed. She believes in marriage so strongly that she will not walk away from any contract, no matter what's done to her. So now, if you look in your chart, Juno is going to tell you what you need to be completely devoted to a person and what you need to do to be a wife. So we look at her as the goddess of marriage, of soul contracts, and divine partnership. And Taylor has Juno at 8 degrees Scorpio, which I said before, 8 degrees is a Scorpio degree. So this is like really Scorpio. And that speaks volumes about what she truly wants in love. She does not want anything shallow. She does not want something to be in just for convenience or because he's hot. She wants a love that will completely transform her. A love that feels like fate and rebirth and total raw intimacy. Because a Scorpio Juno, it doesn't settle. It craves depth, soul merging, and a partner that can meet them at the edge from who they are.
And what's so interesting too is that we talked earlier about her asteroid Andrea in her chart is at 8 degrees Scorpio. And so that means that Juno is conjunct her mother's asteroid in her chart. And what that tells me is two things. One, it tells me that she is meant to be in a divine partnership with her mom, because Juno rules partnership and marriage. It doesn't necessarily just rule your romantic partnership. It can also be just really deep partnerships that you make with people in your life. And so that asteroid for her mom being conjunct Juno, it's like she was always destined to be in a divine partnership with her mom. And it's also her mom really taught her about what a real relationship is like and what to value in relationships. And like Taylor's mom, her mom and dad are separated. I don't think they're formally divorced, but they've been separated for many years. And that really speaks to how Taylor doesn't settle in a relationship. Like she's never going to just settle. She's always going to really want to like grow and transform and not just take what's given to her. Like she's going to really want to find the deepest love, because that's what Scorpio is all about, is like deep love. And it makes a lot of sense now in her mid 30s. She found someone like Travis Kelce. This kind of love couldn't have come earlier in her life. She had to go through the fires of career challenges and heartbreaks and betrayals and personal growth. Like, there were so many invisible strings that pulled her toward this chapter of love. And Juno being in Scorpio is what reflects that.
So wild. And then if that isn't enough, she has a sextile to her Mercury and Neptune placements in Capricorn. So she had to build the dream of Neptune to speak her truth of Mercury and to step into the businesswoman role, which is Capricorn, to earn this kind of love. So it wasn't about giving up her power to find a partner. It was about claiming all of it at first. And then her Juno is trine her Jupiter in Cancer, which is crazy because once she finds that perfect, sacred love, it's expansive, it's heart filling, and it feels like home.
It's so beautiful. And it really just makes so much sense. Like, one of my favorite phrases is trust the timing of your life. And when you look at these goddess asteroids, you could really see the timing of her life was perfect. People were like, why did she have to date so many guys? Why did she have to go through this journey? Like, why didn't it work out with Joe? And it's like, because she had Juno and Scorpio. She had to really transform to get to that point. And it's just really beautiful to see that in her chart. And we wanted to talk about one last asteroid before we get into the big moments of her career. And that is asteroid Karma. Like, isn't that, for me, one of my favorite songs on Midnights? It's an iconic song, but it's also an actual asteroid. And karma is a Hindu philosophy in which your actions influence your future. So good intentions and deeds lead to good karma, while bad intentions and deeds lead to bad karma. And Taylor has asteroid karma at 8 degrees Capricorn. And again, this is the sign of structure, achievement, and legacy. And this tells us that her karmic rewards in life weren't going to come easy. They had to be earned brick by brick through years of persistence.
Wow. So a Capricorn karma really says you get what you build. And Taylor pretty much built an empire. When Scooter Braun bought her masters, it set up this karmic chain reaction. And how did she respond? By re-recording everything, by turning her pain into power, and by taking back control of the narrative. And she's winning. And that is the ultimate Capricorn style karma. She didn't wait for the universe to hand her anything. She worked. She climbed her way to meet it, which is wild. I'm going to go look up karma in my chart. No, I'm kidding. I'll do it later. But wow.
That's the cool thing about these personal asteroids. And I hope that this section of the podcast here really inspired you to dive into those 25,000 asteroids that are out there. And really, like, if you want to go deep into your chart, you want to go deeper than just the planets, you can start looking up asteroids that correspond with your life, or you can book a reading with me and I can help you do that.
Okay, so we're going to now talk about some big moments in Taylor's life and the astrology behind them. So let's go way back before all the stadium tours, before the snake rings, before Midnight, before Folklore, before 1989, back to where the whole thing began.
Yes, let's go all the way back. On October 24th, 2006, a 16-year-old Taylor Swift released her debut studio album in North America. This was Baby Taylor, her debut curls, cowboy boots, acoustic guitar, pouring her teenage heart into country pop melodies, singing about love, growing up, and not fitting in.
I was 16. I would just be sitting there drinking Slurpees from 7-Eleven. Meanwhile, this girl wrote a whole album. That's amazing. And what's wild is how fully formed she already was. Like, even on that first record, you can hear her voice, and not just her literal voice, but her point of view, her storytelling, her emotional clarity. That Cancer Moon and Capricorn Stellium was working overtime already at 16.
Yes, this was the era of Tim McGraw, Teardrops on My Guitar, and Our Song. tracks that would go on to become classics. And they weren't just radio hits, they were diary entries. She was writing what she knew, and we were all listening like, wait, is she reading my thoughts?
It was such a culturally tender moment, like watching a girl with a dream actually do the thing. And little did we know it would be the beginning of one of the most iconic musical careers of our generation. So we took a look at the date of when Taylor's first album dropped, which was, as you said, it was October 2006. So we pulled up a chart of that exact day because when you look at a project that began or was shown off to the world on that day, it's really the astrology chart for the album. And from there, we could talk about the messages that the album really has and what the album is saying to the world, even without listening to the songs. So when we look at that date, we can tell you straight up that Taylor's first album has a Scorpio stellium. And as a reminder, a stellium is when three planets are clustered together in a sign that gives an influx of the sign's energy. So she has Venus, Mars, and the Sun in conjunction in Scorpio, like at the very beginning of the sign at 0 to 1 degrees. And the triple conjunction will set a tone for her artistry, her desire, and her identity to all be bound together and magnetized and focused through the lens of Scorpio. It also has the moon in Scorpio too. I don't consider it part of the stellium because it's all the way on the other side of the sign at 29 degrees, which is literally the most craziest degree to have of any sign because it's like the final boss of the sign. So do you want to talk about her sun in Scorpio?
Yeah. So her sun in Scorpio is part of that early stellium in Scorpio. It's at 1 degrees. And her debut album is really Scorpio coded through and through because it's emotionally raw, it's narratively sharp, and it's energetically magnetic. That first album popped off and we were all drawn to it. And this stellium in Scorpio is really the reason why, astrologically. So it introduced her as a storyteller of emotional truths, and her image at the time was sweet and wholesome, but her lyrics gave a lot more depth than expected. And that contrast felt really compelling to people listening to the album. And what's cool about Taylor is that even as a teen, she was lyrically dissecting situations and picking up on motives and reading between the lines. And that's pure Scorpio perception. Scorpios are very deeply perceptive of all the little details. And so behind every heartbreak lyric was a hint of power, privacy, and purpose, the Scorpio trinity. And Scorpio themes often involve trust, betrayal, and boundaries, and the reclaiming of power. If you look at the songs on that album, those themes of leaning into vulnerability, but hinting at deeper emotional strength, it really like sets the stage for her future transformation. And songs like Cold as You and Teardrops on My Guitar, they don't pull any punches. You know, they expose raw, unfiltered longing and rejection. And one of my favorite songs on her debut album is Our Song. And that's such a like punchy song. And it's really going underneath the layers of like what you would see on the outside of a relationship and going deep into how Taylor really felt and about their relationship. And I think that's a really good explanation of Scorpio energy too.
Whenever I see a Scorpio sun, they always do have a sweetness to them because they know how to have power in a situation. They know how to be pleasant, even though there's a lot going on inside. The album does have that. It's like a very sweet 16-year-old album, but there's so much power that goes on within it. So when I look at this album, the sun of the album would be like the whole image of the album. A budding artist with ambition, with storytelling instincts, and a mysterious edge. Now, the moon is totally different. The moon is going to be the soul of the album. And since the Scorpio moon of this album is at 29 degrees, the soul of the album is full on aching, tenderness, and emotional shadows, and the drive to protect what's precious at all costs. So, like I said before, the 29th degree of any sign, the final and most intense expression of the sign's energy. So, when the moon, which rules the emotional tone and subconscious feeling, sits here in Scorpio, it really is going to signal a point of emotional culmination, crises, and transformation. This album is deep down emotionally charged and deeply personal. Even though it was framed as a youthful country album debut, the album holds a lot of raw emotional weight. The moon reflects a kind of emotional truth telling that's more intense than the packaging suggests, and there is more emotional transformations into every song. So Scorpio rules death and rebirth, and the moon reflects a subtle theme that's really running through the album. The end of innocence, definitely, letting go, and becoming someone new through heartbreak and disappointment. The album touched something that was tender and that was hidden in the audience, particularly to young listeners at the time who were learning how to navigate love and rejection and longing for the first time. It created emotional loyalty by putting private pain into poetic words. So even now, when listeners will revisit the album, they feel how deeply rooted it is to the personal truth. And that's the Scorpio moon signature. Its emotional imprint is permanent. And that album itself has become a personal artifact. It's not just the songs, but it's emotional documents. The moon here says that the work holds soul level meaning. And, there's something like haunting about the melodies of the song. Like, even when they're dressed in like country pop production, you feel something in it. Like, what's going on here? And that's the Scorpio moon.
Totally. And yeah, that anaretic degree of 29 and the stellium being at 0, it's really amazing how she has both. She has the very birth of Scorpio energy, the purest expression at 0 degrees with the stellium there. And then the moon being at that critical degree at the end, the most fully evolved section of the degree. It's like, wow, she had both. Like she brought it all together. And that moon is like the most powerful thing, like emotionally connecting to her audience. And I love how you described all of that because that's so cool. And going back to that initial stellium of 0 degrees, that's where the Venus in the chart is. And the Venus planet is all about love, beauty, and what you value. And this album being at that 0 degree of Scorpio, it really brings a piercing beauty that stares straight through you. The album is really polished and has a youthful sheen, but its emotional undertones are bold, raw, and confrontational. And the love songs are kind of holding emotional consequences within them. It has magnetism through vulnerability. And a Scorpio Venus draws you in by revealing just enough to make you wonder what's beneath. And Taylor's voice on this album carries emotional intimacy with lyrics that feel like secrets shared in confidence. And that's why fans bonded so hard because it felt personal. And Venus and Scorpio, it really merges with its lovers. So the album is about being changed by love and wanting to understand what happens after the kiss, when there's silence and when there's betrayal. And the beauty with the Venus and Scorpio, it really lies in the emotional complexity. And it's kind of like a shadow drenched in sweetness. There's a contradiction in the album's image. The teenage girl with curly hair and cowboy boots, yet she's singing about heartbreak with Scorpio level depth. And that contrast is what made the aesthetic so magnetic and unforgettable. It's really how she values emotional truth above pettiness. Like the album's lyrics don't shy away from jealousy, loneliness, or romantic rage. Even when the melodies are light, the emotions underneath are really sharp and sincere, really embodying that Venus and Scorpio vibe.
I really like how you describe the Venus and Scorpio. What's so cool about this Venus and Scorpio is that it's directly, exactly conjunct. It's Mars and Scorpio. So all of the feminism and masculine aspects of this album are working together as one with Mars and Scorpio at 0 degrees also. The creative drive of this album is strategic and emotionally fueled, like Mars and Scorpio. The songs are crafted with emotional precision, and it turns heartbreak into power. There is an intensity beneath the restraint because, like you said, she's not like screaming and crying into it. She's restraining herself and speaking the truth. Mars in Scorpio does wait, it does watch, and it does strike with precision. So the album does sound really sweet and put together, but underneath it's strategic and it's emotionally loaded with lyrics that kind of hit like these quiet revenge letters. And the Mars placement gives the album a pulse of emotional self protection. There's vulnerability in the storytelling, yeah, but there's also a spine there. It's a readiness to walk away and to remember the wound and to write it all down as a way of reclaiming the power. So Mars in Scorpio turns pain into purpose. Every lyric becomes a form of self-defense, and it's a sharp edge cloaked in melody, which is beautiful. So also Scorpio Mars and Scorpio Venus can be obsessive, I would say. And this album is definitely focused on one core theme, which is how love transforms you and how it wounds you. And it also like awakens something fierce in you. So it's a slow burn, but with like a lot of confidence to it. When you see someone with Mars and Scorpio, there's definitely like a quiet strength to them. It doesn't need to prove anything loudly because it already knows its power. And the energy it gives the album is like a presence that makes Taylor seem very like wise. And it's just so cool how the Mars and the Venus comes together as one. What do you think that this conjunction brings as emotional themes for the album?
Yeah, so having that Venus and Mars together as part of that stellium, it's really all about like emotional exposure. Like Taylor opens the door to the world to witness her private emotions. And listeners of the album really become like tourists in her inner world. And they're traveling through heartbreaks and first loves in each song. And the album really offers a controlled narrative of intense emotional experiences. There's pain and longing, but it's structured into digestible melodic stories. And it also really speaks to her public vulnerability. Scorpio is private by nature, but at 0 degrees, it's about inviting people in. And this really speaks to the paradox of the album, which is deeply private feelings made publicly accessible. And so the Venus Mars conjunction in this event chart, it's magnetic, but it's filtered through a Scorpio lens that only shows what it chooses to reveal. Like when she released this album, it was very calculated. Like she did it with her business partners. Her dad's asteroid is in Scorpio. So it really was part of that vibe, doing it for business. And so that Scorpio lens of other people's money, like she was taking other people's money to make this album public. And so that really is that Venus Mars combination in the chart. And it's also a youthful exploration of love. The album really documents the early steps into emotional intimacy. And that is just so curious and intense and wide-eyed, but it's charged with Scorpio's depth. And something cool about this chart too is that asteroid Taylor and asteroid Swift are conjunct in Sagittarius in the chart at 7 and 8 degrees. And so while this album is super Scorpio, all the Scorpio stellium going on, the Scorpio moon, Scorpio, 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 asteroid Taylor and Swift at the time this album was released were both in Sagittarius. And that really just brought that optimistic shooting the arrow out on the distance, like knowing that this was going to be a long career and there was a lot of learning to be done. And she wanted it to reach the world. Like Sagittarius is such a global energy. Having her asteroids Taylor and Swift in Sagittarius at the time, we're just saying like, let's go, like, let's explore, like, let's see who we can reach with this album. And so I love that juxtaposition of all this Scorpio energy with her personal asteroids, Taylor and Swift, being in Sagittarius. Like such a cool combination.
And so what you're saying is you can look up transits at the moment with and have the names in the transits kind of tell you what chapter in your life you're going through.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's the really cool thing about these charts is like, not only can you look at the snapshot of the planets at the time this album came out, but you can also look at your personal name asteroids and you can see how that's influencing everything as well.
Yeah, because you could see like what house your name is in right now. Like, let's say your house it's going through the fifth house. Maybe you're going through a really creative chapter in your life, or you just got assigned a really exciting project that's gonna take up your creativity. Or if it's in the 11th house, like let's say the asteroid Taylor is going through your 11th house. Maybe you're about to make a friend named Taylor or something.
Exactly. That's so cute. And that's exactly what you can find when you look at those personal asteroids. And now let's rewind to a moment that basically became pop culture canon. And this is the 2009 MTV Video Music Awards. It was on September 13th at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. And at this time, Taylor is only 19 years old.
And she just won Best Female Video for You Belong With Me. And it was the very first award of the night. It was such a huge moment for her. Like teen country star crossing into full blown pop stardom. You could see how excited she was. She gets up on the stage around 9:15 or 9:30 Eastern time, giving her acceptance speech.
And then, boom, out of nowhere, Kanye West storms the stage. He takes the mic right out of her hands and goes, "Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time."
The crowd booed. Kanye just shrugged. He handed the mic back and he walked off like nothing happened. He was so nonchalant about it. And Taylor, you could see it all over her face. She was stunned, like completely blindsided.
And just as a reminder, she was 19. This was her moment, her speech, her first ever VMA win, and it was hijacked on live television in front of millions.
Yeah, and then Kanye was kicked out of the show shortly after, but I mean, the damage was already done. That moment became one of the most viral moments in pop culture of the decade. It launched a media storm and basically rewrote the narrative around them for years to come.
And to her credit, Beyonce later won Video of the Year for Single Ladies. And in such a classy, full circle move, she brought Taylor back on stage to finish the speech that she never got to give.
Thank you, Beyonce. And which honestly says so much. Like, Beyonce didn't have to do that, but she recognized the moment with grace. And for Taylor, it was such a painful, disoriented moment, but also the beginning of her stepping into something bigger. Her voice, her resilience, and her ability to hold composure when everything around her is unraveling.
Yes, it was a huge turning point, and not just in her career, but in how the world saw her and how she learned to own her narrative moving forward. So let's get into the astrology chart interpretation of the moment. So on September 13th in New York City, because we know exactly when this happened, because we know that the award show started at 9 o'clock and she was the first award of the night. So she definitely, this happened to her around 9:15 or 9:30. We can actually pull the exact chart with a rising sign, because in order to have a rising sign in a chart, you have to know the exact time that something happened. And what's cool about this is that the rising of this chart is Taurus at 14 degrees, and 14 is right in the middle of the sign. And so even if we're off by a few minutes, because it's in the middle, we can definitely say it would have been a Taurus rising for this moment. So I think that's really cool about this chart. And so the chart has a Taurus rising, Virgo sun, and a Cancer moon. So let's start with the Taurus rising. Taurus rising is giving all eyes on a moment broadcast to the world.
Yeah, so when I first was like Taurus rising, I'm like, what? This was not a calm filter. But actually, I think it was now that I'm looking at the degree, because the degree speaks to the resilience in the face of public exposure, uncomfortable conditions. So when Kanye embarrassed her, Taylor was able to remain her composure, which is really Taurus rising. It's how things appear. And Taylor appeared totally calm. It showed that she was maintaining dignity under pressure. and continuing to stand tall even when the environment becomes harsh, unpredictable, and humiliating. And I also think the Taurus rising speaks for Kanye, how he was kind of nonchalant too. He just walked up, he's like, hey, Beyonce should have won. Okay, bye. And like, it wasn't, he didn't scream. He didn't go into like one of his tirades. He just said it and walked off. And I think that speaks to Taurus on the ascendant. It gives the moment a strong, visceral, and public tone. So Taurus is all about value and worth and appearances. Taurus also rules self esteem, beauty, and voice. And these are all things that Taylor embodies. The rising sign sets the tone for the event as something, it looks grounded and graceful at first. So Taurus rising will give it that graceful and grounded feel, but then things will quickly get uncomfortable when stability is shaken. And don't poke the bull. Kanye poked the bull. Taurus rising also puts Scorpio on the descendant. So that shows that even though she was calm and composed during this, there was like a power play going on with control and emotional intrusion as part of this dynamic. So Kanye's action came through as a disruptive force and piercing what was really supposed to be like a stable celebratory moment. So that's the
Yeah.
Taurus rising. And then it goes into the Virgo sun. Do you want to talk about the Virgo sun?
Yeah. So, something really interesting about this chart is that the sun in Virgo is conjunct Saturn. And Saturn is the planet of restriction, refinement, and lessons you have to learn. And so the Sun Saturn conjunction in Virgo, it shows themes of criticism, judgment, and shame. Like this conjunction brought public humiliation and also emotional restraint. Virgo is an analytical, perfectionist kind of sign, and it's often concerned with reputation and integrity. So, Saturn here on the Sun together in Virgo, it really weighs the moment down and it creates a heavy, awkward atmosphere. It's like the public celebration, the sun, turns cold, humiliating, and restrictive, Saturn. So this moment became defining for both Kanye and Taylor. The sun conjunct Saturn makes a lasting imprint, and it's something people remember forever. And it's especially when it's challenging someone else's sense of self or public identity. And with this conjunction, there's a sense of being put in your place. And so the Saturn archetype really challenges that sun expression. Taylor, the bright rising star, the sun, is interrupted by an older, more dominant male voice trying to reframe her success, which is Saturn. So those two forces coming together, this was going to be a heavy moment that lasted in our minds for decades to come, just by seeing that the sun and the Saturn were conjunct in Virgo together. And also, Ashlee, what about that moon in Cancer conjunct Mars in the chart?
That's giving protective rage and public emotion. So the Taurus is how it looked. The sun in Virgo is what it was. But then the moon in Cancer conjunct Mars speaks to what it was really like behind the veil. The moon in Cancer is deeply sensitive and vulnerable, especially in front of an audience, and it reflects Taylor's emotional state at the moment, which was exposed, shaken, and overwhelmed in a way. And when it's conjunct Mars, there's nothing passive that's going on about it. There's like this internal rage. She was definitely feeling like an internal rage and defensiveness. And even though it wasn't exposed outwardly in the moment, it's the moon, so it's really deep down. Cancer is protective, especially of the young, feminine, and innocent. And this Mars and Moon conjunction is going to show the public's instinct to defend her. And it's why the audience really reacted to this. They really felt like they wanted to protect the feminine part of this whole thing. And this combo shows how this moment became emotionally volatile. And not just for Taylor, it was really for everyone watching. Like the whole collective felt it. Like the moon is like showing the public mood to it, and Mars added heat and the shock. And this, yeah.
And what's interesting is that she has her moon in Cancer, so she was feeling good. Like this night, coming into the night, she was having her lunar return in Cancer, which everyone has once a month. And so she's like feeling really good. She's like feeling like very fulfilled emotionally. And then this Mars hitting her natural moon sign is like punching her, basically. It felt like she got a gut punch with that combination.
So sad. Yeah, so the Saturn sun reflects the clash between the generational figures, or between someone asserting control and someone just beginning to rise. And also during this moment, a public moment became a myth. So the Taurus rising wrapped this whole thing up into spectacle that everyone was watching, and what should have really been a simple moment of praise became a cultural lasting image that me and Kate are still talking about 15 years later.
Yes. And what's so interesting too is that her personal asteroid Taylor is at this time that this happened was conjunct Venus in Leo. And so again, speaking to her lunar return in Cancer, you're feeling good during your lunar return. You're really feeling like you're in your own personal emotional energy. And then asteroid Taylor was on Venus. And so that to me is like you're winning an award. Like Taylor is winning an award because Venus is like what you value. And in the sign of Leo, it's like you're on stage and you're accepting an award. So she had a lot of good things going for her in this chart. That's the thing about this moment is like, it wasn't all bad. She won the first award of the night. Like Beyonce stood up for her after, like brought her back on stage. And like that really speaks to her asteroid Taylor in the sky being with Venus and Leo. Like that was that energy. But what's interesting is that asteroid Swift was in the sign of Virgo along with the Sun and Saturn. And so even though Taylor's asteroid Taylor was with Venus, winning an award, feeling good, asteroid Swift was hanging out with the Sun and Saturn. And so it was like something was going to happen to her reputation that really lasted for a long time, that was going to be part of her cultural image. And it was always going to be associated with Swifties, like asteroid Swift being in Virgo. And then the other thing I thought was really interesting is that asteroid Karma, which we talked about earlier, that was in the sign of Libra on this day. And so to me, what that says is like, she was always going to have a karmic situation happen with a partnership on this day. Libra rules partnerships, one-on-one partnerships. And also Libra is the sign of justice and like keeping the peace. And so like we're talking about with the Taurus rising, it kind of almost being a little nonchalant of a moment. Asteroid Karma in Libra was like, well, like we'll keep the peace today. But for the long term, the astrology of this moment, it was like, but we're going to balance the scales of justice. Like eventually everyone's going to know who was on the right side of history with this moment. And spoiler alert, it wasn't Kanye.
Yeah, oh yeah. Totally.
So now let's go back to a different cultural moment for Taylor, which is June 30th, 2019. And this is the day that Taylor's world turned upside down. Here's what happened. Big Machine, her former label, the one that held the masters of her first 6 albums, on June 30th, 2019, they were sold to Scooter Braun. And Taylor had been trying to buy those masters for years, but was only offered a deal where she'd have to sign away 6 more albums just to earn them back. And she rightfully called this unacceptable.
Here's where it gets even messier. So Taylor's dad, Scott Swift, actually owned a minority stake in Big Machine, but he didn't join the final shareholder call about the sale because of a super strict NDA. So his legal rep from 13 Management was on the call instead. So technically he wasn't in the room when it happened, and it's not really clear what exactly he knew or when. So after the deal was finalized, the label's founder, Scott Borchetta, claimed that Taylor knew about it ahead of time, even posting a text message he said came from her, though it's never been verified. And like the whole thing felt incredibly shady.
Yes, and Taylor, she responded immediately and iconically. She took to Tumblr that same day and told her side of the story. She said she wasn't told Braun would be the buyer, and she described him as an incessant, manipulative bully. She said it felt like her entire musical legacy was being handed to someone who had actively tried to undermine and control her.
So powerful is that she didn't lose her cool and she didn't lash out. She made a clear and thoughtful and pretty strategic statement, like total Capricorn Mercury moment. She was steady, she was grounded, and she told the truth and she started planning her next move.
Which, as we all know, ended up being the re-recording project, which was the massive historical reclamation of her voice, her work, and her legacy. It was calm, it was calculated, and it was so Capricorn stellium and Saturnian coded. Like, you want to steal from me? I'll just rebuild it and make it better, and you're going to wish you'd never tried.
This was a defining moment for Taylor, not just as an artist, but as a woman taking ownership of her own story. And she did it with clarity and with class and with so much Capricorn control. So now that we've set the stage for the day, let's talk about that cosmic climate. We drew a chart. Well, we generated a chart from the computer for June 30th, 2019. Now, we don't have the time of the chart of the time that the call happened or the time that the purchase happened. So we're going to talk about the general astrology of the day. Do you want to start with the Cancer Sun?
So, Cancer Sun, that's where the sun was when this situation occurred for Taylor. So the sun represents the core identity of the moment. And in Cancer, it brings the spotlight to emotional roots, family, safety, and origin stories. So Taylor's early music catalog is her emotional DNA, and it holds the raw vulnerability and storytelling that built her legacy. And her masters aren't just songs, they're pieces of her past self imprinted with memories, heartbreaks, triumphs, and the voice of a younger Taylor navigating the world. And so on this day, the sun in Cancer really illuminated a betrayal of those roots. The fact that her creative children were sold without her knowledge or consent speaks to a deeply Cancerian wound, which is the pain of being cut off from something that you gave life to. And Cancer energy is nurturing. And this sun placement underscores how deeply personal and maternal Taylor's connection to her masters was. The ownership was never just about money or contracts, it was about emotional authorship. The sun in Cancer really says, you don't get to sell my story without me. And the sun at 8 degrees Cancer, which, as we've talked about several times in this episode, it's a Scorpio degree.
It's coming up in this episode.
Yeah, that's really interesting because that Scorpio vibe of the degree 8 is it's nurturing in Cancer because the sun is in Cancer, but it's also fiercely protective like Scorpio. It's saying, I built this with my soul and you don't get to take it from me. And so her Tumblr post really radiated this exact energy, which was vulnerable, but also full of strength.
So I was also thinking that her moon is in Cancer. So when the sun was in Cancer that day, it was putting a light on her own eternal self. Like it was kind of going behind her own veil and it was coming out, which sounds pretty painful.
Absolutely. Oh, and then the moon that day that this happened was in Gemini. And so what does that mean, Ashlee?
So as we know, talked about, the moon will govern your feelings, your instincts, and your public mood. So when something's in Gemini, that rules communication and contracts that you're reading through, phone calls, media, and duality. So on the day that her masters were sold, the moon in Gemini will reflect a sudden emotional jolt. It's getting news that will flip the narrative and leave you reeling. So Gemini moons process things intellectually first and emotionally later. So Taylor's reaction was a lengthy, articulate Tumblr post, and that really channels the Gemini moon. She did it quick because Geminis do move pretty quick. They're not a slow, let's sit and think about it kind of thing. So quickly, publicly, and with precise storytelling, detailing to who knew what and when. So this was a case presented almost like evidence in a trial. So Gemini will also rule like misinformation and manipulation and the shadow side will be of a Gemini is like hidden moments. So the moon speaks to the sense of her being blindsided. Like everyone else has just been in a conversation that she was excluded from, which is so Shadow Gemini. It was a media and message betrayal, and it wasn't just an emotional one. It was like, we're taking over this without killing you. And we even saw her fans become activated too in this emotionally. Millions of people were instantly aligning with her, tweeting their support, and re experiencing her discography as an act of emotional protest.
Yeah, there's nothing more Gemini moon than a bunch of tweets coming out in support.
Yeah.
And Twitter was like the thing back in 2019. So that makes total sense.
The Mars that day, Mars was traveling through Cancer also, and it was at 29 degrees, the hardest degrees possible for Cancer. Mars doesn't really like being in Cancer. Mars wants to throw fires and start wars, and Cancers just want to like cry and feel it and write poems about it. So that mix isn't the most comfortable mix for that day. At 29 degrees, it's the final degree of the sign. So it's showing where pressure peaks and where unresolved themes, emotional themes, will really erupt. It carries a sense of urgency, of fate, and of crisis. So there's often no more room to contain or delay what's really been bubbling beneath the surface. So this day is really showing a boiling point of all this stuff going on, a culmination of Taylor's frustration. And think of all the years that really built up to this moment. She had a strained relationship with Scott Borchetta and the Big Machine. She was feeling undermined and misrepresented in the press. And she was watching other people really hold the keys for her life work. So all of that's been bubbling back. She's been holding back. She's been quiet. She tried to be diplomatic, but at this point, Mars was activated and not anymore. I always tell people who have in readings like Mars and Cancer, like when you feel like you want to lash out, maybe don't. Because you know how crabs like walk sideways? When a Cancer in Mars lashes out, it gives like something similar to marching sideways of a crab. Like it's never gonna come straight up with a good burn. Like I would always tell people with Mars and Cancer to just chill, think out, and then write them a really good letter because that would be way better.
And that's exactly what Taylor did. She wrote a letter. So
Yes, she did.
that's such great advice. Like everybody take note of Ashlee's advice if you have Mars and Cancer. And you know what's so crazy about this too is that in the chart, asteroid Scott is at 29 degrees of Cancer. So her dad's name is Scott. The guy who bought her master's is named Scott. Like Scott was destined to be on this Mars. Like she was going to be burned by a man named Scott. And she also probably felt like not betrayed by her dad, but she was kind of like, Dad, like what happened? Like you were taken out of this. You weren't on the call. Like, what do you mean you weren't on the call? Like there was a lot of tension around Scott. And so the fact that that asteroid is at 29 degrees Cancer, exactly with the Mars energy that you just described so well, it's like, well, yeah, that was the snapshot of the sky on that day.
Feels like the Matrix. Like on the day Scott was at 29 degrees, conjunct Mars, like it's almost like you can't run away from that.
Nope. And that really spurned Taylor into action to use that Gemini moon energy of the day to write, like you were saying, if you have Mars in Cancer, write a letter. Write a good letter,
Don't
think
just
about
yell
it
at a
before you
meeting.
post it. Because I bet you she wanted to call them and be like, and just give them a piece of her mind. And instead, she used that Gemini energy to connect with all of her fans and the public. And that was really smart. And speaking of communication, the Leo Mercury that was in the sky on the day that this happened was a big part of the story too. So Mercury rules communication, information, media, and expression. And when it's in Leo, Mercury really speaks with passion, flair, and authority. It doesn't whisper, it declares. And Leo is the sign of the performer, the royal, the queen, and the storyteller. So Mercury in Leo on this day, it's really the energy of speaking from the heart, proud, emotional, and fiercely expressive. And So this placement is all about owning your voice and delivering your truth like it belongs on a stage. And Taylor's now iconic Tumblr post was the embodiment of Mercury and Leo. It was bold and emotionally charged. It wasn't a corporate statement filtered through PR. She named names and told a story about how she learned her masters were sold and how betrayed she felt and how others in power tried to silence her. And she wrote as someone reclaiming the stage, like not just the facts, it was about creative ownership of the moment. And this was Taylor speaking as a woman, declaring, "This is what happened, and I won't be quiet." And it echoed her artistic pride. Her work has value, and she should have been consulted. And the erasure of her voice was unacceptable. And what's interesting too is that when we talked about her chart, she has her south node in Leo. And so this was a big release for her. Your south node is the energy that you're releasing in this life. And so Leo Mercury being co-present with her south node, it's like she had to make this bold statement and express herself so that it could be alchemized by being released. Honestly, like this moment was a big part of her letting go of the past, even because things were being taken from her. And it encouraged her to lean into her Aquarius North Node, which is like, I need to connect with all the fans online. Aquarius rules the online community. So I just thought that was really interesting. The fact that Mercury was in Leo with her South Node opposite her North Node.
That really blows my mind. And when you really lean into that, it does bring out her Venus, and it helps other people really get on your side because she used social media on the other side of it. That was brilliant, Kate. I really liked that connection you made.
Oh, thank
Um,
you. Well, let's talk about, can you talk about Chiron and where Chiron is? Because we're talking about wounds. So
yeah,
what
what a
was going
great
on with the
segue.
wounds that day?
Speaking about the wounds, Chiron, the planet of wounds, was in Aries at 5 degrees. So Chiron in Aries, it really symbolizes the wound of not being allowed to be fully yourself. And especially when it comes to your independence and your self-expression and your leadership. There's often a history of being challenged or dismissed or undermined when you're asserting your identity. So that day with Chiron and Aries, Taylor was confronted with the public blow to her own autonomy, and the most personal parts of her career, aka her masters, were sold behind her back. So this really struck a core of who she was: a storyteller, a songwriter, and a young woman who built herself from scratch. Chiron in Aries reflects the pain of being stripped of the authority of your own life, a deep violation to the right of self definition. So, this transit echoes the wound of not being chosen, of not being consulted, and having her own identity, like really being treated like a commodity. But Aries is also the sign of the warrior. So, having Chiron here pushes the wounded to become their own hero, and not just to survive, but to rise with purpose. So the example of Taylor writing this letter and handling it so good, it worked out for her. Because with Chiron, you're always going to feel the wound of where it is in your chart. But the moment you take action and like work with it really well, it helps the people around you um,
Yeah,
thrive.
that's so beautiful. That's really beautiful the way that you get, because yeah, Chiron, it can hurt, but like you said, when you take action, that's when you can turn pain into like into magic.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and pain into purpose. Exactly. That's so true. And one thing I wanted to mention before we move on is that asteroid Taylor on this day was at 0 degrees Virgo. And that to me, so that really says, 0 degrees is, we've talked about it throughout this episode. It's like the purest expression of the sign. And 0 degrees Virgo, it was like, girl, you're going to be starting on that re-recording project. Like this was the day where it was like, okay, Virgo, details, combing through every little piece of the production process. Like this was the first day, this was day one of her having to start that project. And it was basically like a rebirth for her. And with Taylor being in the sign of Virgo, it's like she had to really look at her past albums with a critical lens and figure out like, well, what could I change? Like, what could I do to make these albums even better? And so I thought that was really interesting that Asteroid Taylor was at 0 degrees Virgo. And then also Asteroid Swift was at 14 degrees Sagittarius, co-present with Jupiter. So Jupiter was at 17 degrees and Asteroid Swift is at 14 in Sagittarius. And so the Sagittarius placement of Asteroid Swift really gave her, combined with Jupiter, some luck and some optimism and some hope, because it's like, this was horrible what happened to her. Like her masters being stolen from her, like that was an ending for her. But Asteroid Swift being conjunct Jupiter is like, you know, it could just be the beginning though. And her having this whole re-recording project, Jupiter really blessed Asteroid Swift because she has more daily listeners than ever. Like her numbers are so much higher now than they were at the time that this happened. And she's gained so many fans through this process. Like Jupiter literally was like, you want more Swifties? You want some optimism? Like, here you go. So how cool is that?
I'm loving these connections you're making. I was also thinking when you talked about 0 degrees of Virgo, when you see something in 0 degrees of Virgo, it gives the image of like a head. And what it really means is when you see something at that placement, you're supposed to go into your head and plan things. And I love how that's what she did. She went in there and planned how she was going to re-record it and all of her next steps. I just love when astrology mirrors real life. Very cool.
Yeah, this is so fun looking at all these events and how they all really, the astrology of the day really tells the story. Like how cool. And we are going to talk about one more big moment in this episode, and that is Taylor getting her masters back. So
See?
she had her masters stolen, and then on May 30th, 2025, she made headlines again because it was finally time for her to reclaim her masters. The post announcing the news hit social media in the early morning hours of May 30th, 2025. And like many Swifties, I got the scoop from a friend who sent an emergency text to our Taylor group chat, and I had to pull up the chart. So, Ashlee, what does the chart look like for this day?
So you casted a chart for Palm Beach, Florida, where Taylor and Travis were seen just days after the announcement, seemingly on vacation. So while we can't confirm that's where she physically posted it from, the symbolism in the planetary placements speaks loudly regardless of the location. So let's dive into the astrology of the moment, focusing on the planetary energies. We're not going to do the houses, but with more speculative without a confirmed location. So let's talk about the fiery elephant in the room, Saturn in Aries. Okay, go.
Yes. When Taylor announced that she had purchased her masters, the first thought that came to my mind after, oh my God, yay, so happy for her. Finally, it all belongs to her, was, oh my God, Saturn in Aries. So while I'm sure that Taylor had been working on this deal for quite some time, she didn't actually announce it until Saturn moved into Aries. And the day that this happened, Saturn was at 0 degrees Aries. So it literally was was right when this energy started. So what does that mean? Aries is the sign of yourself. It's like you said earlier in the episode, it's I am. It's like the energy of just do it. And Saturn being in Aries is like, okay, just do it, but what is the heaviness of the moment? Like it's a very, like we talked about with Kanye moment, Saturn and the sun were right next to each other. It was a very heavy moment. Like it's a heavy hitting moment for her having Saturn and Aries. And what's also really interesting is that Saturn was conjunct Neptune in Aries at the same time. And what that means is that the Aries, the sign of bold initiation, personal courage, and trailblazing identity, is combining with the dreams, Neptune, and discipline, Saturn, into a fiery, action oriented container. And so this energy is like making the impossible possible and building what you dream from the ground up. And so this really speaks loudly to the era that she took her power back. Neptune represents imagination, artistry, and idealism. Saturn is symbolizing structure, ownership, and longevity. And the conjunction in Aries becomes a cosmic call to fight the dream, make it real. And that's exactly what Taylor did when she set out to record her albums again and reclaim her masters. So this energy of the day, it's like she didn't just want justice and she didn't just dream about it. She did something about it. That's Saturn and Aries. Like she didn't just mourn the dream. She rebuilt it from scratch. She preserved her legacy note by note. And that's the combination of Saturn and Neptune and Aries. It's like a once in a generation ability to transform ephemeral creative vision into something concrete and enduring and fully her own. And this transit mirrors the exact work it took to re-record all her past albums. This is a literal reformation of her artistic identity, and she carried it out with tireless intention. She wasn't just reclaiming songs, she was reasserting authorship over her story. And that's why I freaked out when I saw the chart and I saw this conjunction happening in Aries with Saturn and Neptune.
So wild. When I think of Saturn and Aries, I think of like Girl Scouts, like earning one badge at a time to move to the next level. Because Saturn and Aries is like the I am, let's do this. Let's do this in steps. Let's break it down. Let's master each step before getting to the next way. I want you to really slow down and grab it. And then I'm thinking Neptune, for me, it just makes things so big that you just get confused and you don't know what to do. So I really admire Taylor's ability to like get this done. And yeah, so on this day, the sun was in Gemini. Gemini rules language, communication, and storytelling. So Gemini is the sign of the writer, the lyricist, and the wordsmith. Naturally, this chart's Gemini sun speaks volumes, like literally. Music at its core is the poetry set to melody. And some of the most legendary wordsmiths in music, especially in rap and pop, share strong Gemini placements. Kanye West, the Gemini. This was a day about words, messaging, and reclaiming narrative power. And what's really cool is that the sun and Mercury that day were conjunct, meaning they were coming to the Earth from the exact same space combined. So when the sun is conjunct another planet, it's called a cazimi. That's what they call it. It's like a rare, potent alignment where Mercury is going to be right in the hot part of the sun. So the mind, with the brain, the thinking of the whole situation, and the sun, the brightness and the identity of it are perfectly in sync. And in Gemini, Mercury rules the sign of Gemini. So this alignment's really going to supercharge your communication, intellectual property, truth telling, and authorship. This is the zodiac's master of narrative and contracts, where the voice of the artist is returning. So when Mercury's in the heart of the sun, the message really is crystal clear and fully supported by identity and power. And as the universe says, this is the truth and this belongs to me. Taylor's original masters are her original words. It's like coming from her. It's her voice and her story, which is governed by the Mercury in Gemini part. There are a public record of her soul, like published parts of her life, her soul, and her feelings at every age. And that really does go beyond music. So Taylor's battle for her masters is about the ownership of her original recordings. Gemini is about the original and all the copies that comes from it. So it really aligns that day. Control over her own written words and lyrics. Gemini equals language. And it's also about the right to own her story the way she lived it. Gemini equals narration. And she's the one who gets to decide what's real and what's official, because Gemini equals the naming and the versioning of it. So this entire thing, this entire concept of what happened, Taylor's version, is Gemini coded because it literally centers on versioning and duplication and rewriting the past, which is Gemini's exact domain. She replicated the originals on her own terms. And by doing it under this cazimi, where the sun and the Mercury are right together, she's reclaiming her name. And Taylor's version no longer needs to be a qualifier. It's the definite version of what's going on. She regained control over what the world hears and what they remember of her own legacy. She steps into full narrative authority, no more distortion, no more gatekeepers. And this moment becomes a crowning of the author, where her mind, her voice, and her public self, aka Mercury plus the sun, aligns in the sign of language, truth, and memory.
Wow, that's incredible. That is just amazing. I love how you explained all of that. And what's so cool is that this Kazemi that you just talked about is creating a trine to Pluto in Aquarius in the chart. And so a trine is a 120-degree angle between planets in the same element. So in this case, it's air, Gemini and Aquarius. And this represents natural harmony, effortless flow, and talents that can be expressed gracefully and powerfully. So trines allow things to unfold with clarity and strength. And Pluto in Aquarius, that is the energy of Pluto transforming what it touches. And this energy is what we're currently all experiencing in the sky, Pluto in Aquarius. It says we're revolutionizing ownership models, technology and media systems, how communities support artists, and the power of collective voices versus the elite. And so this Pluto and Aquarius energy being trine the Gemini Kazemi, it's Taylor reclaiming her masters, and it's helping these transformations happen publicly on the world stage, mirroring similar themes that are going on in all of our lives as well. And this really represents how she's securing full digital rights and licensing and innovative ownership models like we're all seeing in the world with NFTs and artist streaming contracts. And her fight for this wasn't fueled by emotions. She went Aquarius style, which is something she's really good at because her Venus is in Aquarius. And it's really a smart, forward thinking, and systemic approach that changes the system that allowed her masters to be taken from her in the first place. So her words and her releases and her messaging are strategically crafted to shift power structures. And this trine between Pluto and Aquarius and the Gemini Kazemi energy, it shows that what she's doing now cements her authority for decades. And it's going to help other artists in the process as well. And that is just really cool.
Very cool. And it speaks to how Pluto is a collective placement, that right now, everyone in this world, like the focus of transformations is with technology and ownership models, the power, the collective voices, like you said. So Taylor doing this is really part of her contribution to this Pluto in Aquarius going on, which I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. And something else beautiful is that on this day, the Taylor reclaimed her masters. The moon was in Cancer, and this is again a lunar return. And so everybody has a lunar return once a month when the moon comes back to the sign that you were born with it in. So on this day, the moon was in Cancer. This is the same sign that Taylor has her natal moon in. And so this is just a monthly moment when the emotional tides of the present align with the emotional imprint that she was born with. And the moon in Cancer speaks to emotional security, nourishment, and the deep roots of belonging. And Taylor's Cancer moon has always been the quiet anchor beneath her sparkling persona, the part of her that feels everything deeply and that remembers and protects her inner world like a sacred diary. So when the moon returned to Cancer on this milestone day, it wasn't just a transit, it was really a spiritual and emotional full circle moment. She wasn't just reclaiming music, she was reclaiming memory, identity, and safety. The very songs that she wrote from the heart were finally coming home to the woman who created them. And this lunar return reminds us that ownership isn't just about business. For someone like Taylor, a Cancer moon soul, it's about emotional sovereignty. It's about saying, stories are mine, these memories are mine, and I get to hold them in the way that I choose. And the universe timed this moment with its divine precision, letting her Cancer moon lead the way, reminding her and all of us that when you fight for what's yours with integrity and heart, the universe delivers a sense of home that you can really feel in your bones.
That's so sweet. And speaking about fighting. Mars on that day, the planet of action, of fighting and drive, was in Leo, the sign of performance, visibility, and creative confidence. So I feel like when Mars is in Leo, like you have this ability to just shout out what's going on. Like you're going to call your friends, you're going to speak up, you're going to talk about what's going on. And on this day, Taylor was able to like be bright and to shine on a day that she was doing action and fighting. And also, what's really cool about that day is that Mars was in opposition to the goddess asteroid Pallas Athena in Aquarius, which really gives like strategic brilliance because you have Mars on one side in Leo, ready to shine, ready to sparkle, get what you want, showing that on the other side of Aquarius that there's like this brilliance going on of getting things done in like this really, really, really smart way. So Pallas Athena is the asteroid of wisdom, of strategy, and of feminine intelligence. So while Mars took bold action, Pallas in Aquarius represented this cool, long term vision rooted in community and values. So the tension between fiery performance and strategic planning will paint a picture of Taylor's genius. So she didn't act impulsively, she moved with total precision, and every step she took over the past 6 years was so calculated and intentional. And this opposition, it feels like a cosmic green light from the goddess of wisdom that says, make your move and claim your worth.
That's so cool how Mars came into the mix of all of this. And to more goddess asteroid talk, we love the goddesses here. And Taylor is so connected to so many of them in the chart. And also, what's really cool is that Chiron and Venus were both in Aries on this day. And that really says healing through reclamation. So, Chiron, the wounded healer, was in Aries, the sign of the self, right there with Venus, the planet of love, beauty, and value. This really screams, I'm healing my wounds by reclaiming what I value most, myself. Taylor's identity was so intertwined with the music that she no longer owned, and getting her master's back was more than a legal win. It was a reclamation of self-worth. Venus and Chiron in Aries represent self-love forged in fire, owning your story, fighting for your art, and healing in public. So cool. I love how that story is told with all of those different asteroids.
And this chart is soaked in emotion, intelligence, and in fire. It speaks to the personal and collective weight of Taylor's decision. And not just for her, but for all the artists everywhere. And even though we might not know the exact minute or the location she hit post, the stars tell her story loud and clear. Taylor Swift bought back her masters under a chart that really honored her journey. A Gemini sun for her voice, a Cancer moon for her vulnerability, and a Mars in Leo for the power she stepped into.
Wow. And then also her personal asteroids, she had asteroid Taylor in Capricorn on this day. And so right there with her stellium in Capricorn. And so again, this is just another example of her personally building her legacy through her name on this day with that asteroid Taylor being in Capricorn. And then asteroid Swift was in Taurus. And so this is very chill vibes. Like I feel like when she released this news, it was like all the Swifties breathed a deep breath. We were like, oh, we could finally rest. We could finally relax. We can enjoy the sensual pleasures, Taurus, of her music. We can just listen to any version of the music we want because we're grounded in this moment. This asteroid Swift is in Taurus. We can just completely chill. And what also I thought was cool is that asteroid Karma on this day is in Leo. And like, how much more poetic can it get? Asteroid Karma in the sign of Leo on stage. She got her karma back. She's announcing her purchase back of her master's. So proud. I bet this was one of the most proud days of her life. Like, I think she said in her post, I want to get Shamrock tattooed on my forehead now, which is the holding company that let her buy her master's back finally. So Yeah, just karma and Leo vibes on this day. How cool for her. Full circle moment.
Full circle moment. I have a shamrock tattoo on my leg.
Oh my God, you and Taylor twinning. That's amazing.
We're twinning. With that said, that's a wrap on this episode. We love getting to talk about Taylor's personal asteroids, from goddess energy to family legacy to all the jaw-dropping cosmic synchronicities between, and the astrology behind some of the biggest, most defining moments of her career.
It's beautiful how her chart holds so much of her story, even in the tiniest asteroids. And honestly, it just proves what we always say. The chart never lies. And when you zoom in on the asteroids, that's where the real magic happens.
Thank you so much for listening and for being here in this space with us. And if you're loving those deep dives, please don't forget to rate, review, and share with your Swiftie besties on your Astro Curious group chat. And let us know in the comments what you think of all this cosmic tea we just spilled.
Yes, thank you so much for being here with us. We'll be back soon with even more astrology, pop culture, and planetary tea. We are the Planetary Princesses, and as always, your invitation to the cosmos is open. Keep shining like the star you are, and we'll see you in the next episode, Cosmic Royal Family.